Oh, this is a webcast.
We do both. Radio show, live webcast at the same time, and it's archived on our Lansing News site.
Yes, I looked at some of the archive items.
Ah. Greetings, welcome. This is Lansing Online News Radio, WLNZ LCC Radio 89.7. Here in Lansing, Michigan, I am Bonnie Buckaroo. You can also, in addition to catching the radio show here, you can also go online to LansingOnlineNews.com and watch our live webcast at the same time. I am joined by my partner in crime, Bill Castanere, here this evening. And what is new in your area of the world these days, Bill?
Leaf breaking. Ooh. I think every leaf is coming down today, it looks like.
Well, with this, I guess there's a storm coming tonight. That'll get the rest of them. Yeah, it's that time.
It was a gorgeous day today. Beautiful day.
I was remembering a few years ago when it was in the 70s on Halloween night, 5 or 6 years ago. It was a lot of fun to watch the other kids out. So often that's a miserable night where everybody's wet and cold.
It snowed before. I think when my son was growing up and trick-or-treated and I had to go with him, it was always snowing or sleeting or something like that.
Yeah, usually on the nights you had the duty, honestly.
Yeah. We don't get many kids in our neighborhood really anymore.
Oh, don't you?
No. There's none that live near us, and we're just a little bit out of the way.
I live a half mile back into the woods.
You don't.
And so in 35 years I've had 2 trick-or-treaters. And the first time somebody showed up, it was so bad that not only did I didn't even have a nickel. I looked at my purse, I had nothing. I mean, I looked for apples, candy, would you like to wait while I make you a tuna fish sandwich? You know, I mean, I don't know what to do. I mean, it was really bad. And the family made the mistake of coming back a few years later, and I was still no better prepared. So.
They deserve it then.
I guess so. Gluttons for punishment. But you're going to go to Zombie Night.
Right, Zombie Night at Schuler's, which is coming up in the Eastwood Town Center. It's their 4th annual Zombie Night, so this is something that's been going a while. Whitney, who is the promotion manager there, is very much into zombies. And this year, what they're doing is they've invited Rita Weber, who is the mother of Jordan Weber, who won the Olympic gold medal in the last Olympics in London for gymnastics. And Rita's written a book, but she's also going to serve as the judge of the Zombie Olympics, like eating brains and things of that nature.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a little unusual, but you know, Whitney is unusual promotion manager.
Is that Saturday night?
It is the 27th. I am just looking. But I think it is the 27th Saturday night. I just wanted to find the time. It's typically at 7. But Rita's written a book called Gym Mom, and it's basically everything she learned in about, what would it be, 12 years of raising her daughter as an Olympic champion, or, you know, a prospective Olympic champion, and the things you go through, and the things she learned along the way. She told me that she wished somebody would have handed her a book like this.
I'll bet.
Because she was just going into it blind. She had no idea of what to expect, what it would entail, and I kind of told her, I said, you're perfect for the zombie night because you must have been a zombie at times. I mean, the amount of hours you have to put into becoming an Olympic champion is unbelievable. I mean, it's just
the time
she started when she was 5.
Yeah.
When she was 5 years old, she started training.
My mother had visions of me being Ginger Rogers. So I started ballet at 3, and I was on toe at 5, and I was practicing 4 to 5 hours a night all the way through elementary school. It was just brutal. And I was no good. You know, so all of her plans came to naught. I mean, I may have been the clumsiest ballerina ever to have hit the stage. I auditioned for the Ted Mack Amateur Hour. I'm that old. And they opened the door, and I was on what were called toe tap shoes. They had little taps on the toes.
Yeah,
Nobody told me that it was a waxed floor. I zipped from one end of the stage to the other and fell off. You know, I mean, that ended my career with Ted Mack. So yes.
Now, where was Ted Mack located? Was this one of his traveling shows?
Well, no, the auditions were held nationwide.
Okay, I got you. I remember that. That was the Ted Mack Amateur Hour.
I opened once for a show for 6,000 at Cleveland Arena with my little toe tap act, and it was scary again because of the Black Orchestra pitch. You could easily fall off. I was always afraid of falling, mostly. Just trying to stay upright was mostly what my
Kind of
act
funny.
consisted of, so that was fun.
Ted Mack was really one of the forerunners in reality TV, wasn't it?
He well, more reality than I had planned on in some cases.
People were really bad on that.
Yeah,
And
well,
they just let him go.
I was going to say, speaking of zombies, we do have a presidential debate tonight. And
We hope they don't. We hope they don't turn up as zombies.
Well, one of them is a little wooden.
Yes.
I hate to say it, but it's going to be an interesting evening, I think, trying to figure out whether there is, I mean, part of the challenge, I think, tonight is going to be that most people are not tremendously well versed in all the ins and outs of foreign policy. I can't imagine them caring as much as it appears some conservatives do about the ins and outs of the Benghazi incident.
And that's probably what Romney will try to focus on as much as he possibly can.
Didn't do him any good the last
He did not.
And I'm not sure, maybe he'll stay away from it. He may stay away from it for that reason. But I do think that we live in this world where, I now know that I was just reading the other day, they're going to be deploying 30,000 drones domestically because we have found this drone program so successful, right? And basically being able to wage war, undeclared war against countries where we're conducting drone attacks in the Middle East. I think there are some very serious issues to be discussed, and my suspicion is none of that will be illuminating this evening.
No, I don't think so. They're going to, actually, this one's going to, probably, if any, is going to be even more shallow because it's the third debate.
Oh, you think the time, yeah.
The fall off rate's got to be huge.
Oh, in the audience?
Yeah, it's got to be massive. There's baseball games.
I took a look, though, at some of the statistics. If we do peg the defense budget to 4% of GDP, the enormous boost in spending would be incredible. I mean, we're talking about billions upon billions of dollars, and with all these tax cuts coming, how that's going to be supported in an era when we're essentially supposed to be winding out of wars, not getting into new ones. Can that possibly be true?
Well, we're supposed to, and Obama tells us we're supposed to save a lot of money when we get out of our wars.
Yeah, well,
we don't have the daily cost of supporting the troops overseas.
I don't. Well, maybe this is a good segue because we are going to be talking first with economist Alfred Allen Schmid. He's now using all three names now that he is an author and has segued from his career, and now he's a professor emeritus from Michigan State University in economics. And he is now writing and self-publishing books, including his new tome, The Seekers. And welcome to the Lansing Online News Radio Show, Alfred Allen. Should I just call you Allen?
Yes, ma'am.
And tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, the book grew out of my interest in genealogy. I was investigating the ancestors of my late first wife. And after I finished the genealogy and the facts, born, died, had these children, it was kind of boring, actually.
Genealogies tend to be boring.
Yeah.
So I thought, how can I make this more interesting?
Oh, make up stories about them.
Let's make up stories about it.
Ah.
So that's what I did.
So these are people from your family.
From my wife's
From your wife's family.
Yes.
And so it's based on real people.
Correct.
Did you get some kernel of the story from people about these people, or is it historical documents? What did you look at?
Historical documents. I was fortunate in that this family, the two families actually, were early enough settlers wherever they were in New York, actually here in Michigan. And the other family started in Virginia and came to Kentucky and then Missouri and then Nebraska. That they got into local history books.
Oh, wow.
Just dead luck,
Yeah, there weren't that many people.
Right.
I mean, just
early settlers,
Ah.
And there their names were.
And they had somewhat a unique name.
No, like Todd and Byron. Very
Yeah.
But there were enough of them, and they were the sort of first landers in various places,
Yes.
that they would be recorded in various places. Interesting. Now, my relatives would be there, but it was only from the prison records.
Easier to research.
easier to find them.
You never know when you start what you're going to find.
Yeah, what did you find? What intrigued you as you went through those records?
Well, one thing that sticks in my mind is that nothing has changed politically.
Really?
Because these two families were in the Revolutionary War. We were great for patriotism, but no one wanted to pay for it. It started way back. And so, they weren't paid and whatever, all sorts of things because the states actually had to finance some of the soldiers, and they didn't want to.
So they were fighting for almost no pay?
Right. They got script and whatever.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, Congress gave them land. And in part, that's the title of my book, The Seekers, seeking after land and a better life for generations.
So that made them landed gentry. That gave them a stake they hadn't had before?
Yes.
Did you see that as a turning point in the family where they went from being seekers to being in one place?
Yes, yes it was. Mm-hmm. It goes through when everybody was a farmer to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So it's very illuminating in that regard.
Were the family members, did they come from England?
I think originally they did. I don't know too much about their origin. One family was from Virginia, and they'd been there several generations before the war, and they were plantation people. They grew tobacco.
Oh.
Well, guess what? They had slaves.
Yeah, Virginia. I was going to ask.
Yes.
Well, that must be a little, isn't it unsettling?
It is unsettling.
I wouldn't like to look back and find that. No, it wouldn't make me necessarily, I mean, that's a very problematic past, isn't it?
Well, our past is problematic.
Yeah.
There are several themes which run through the book. One is slavery, and the other is the treatment of the Indians, neither of which we can be very proud of.
Yeah.
And eventually, several generations later, one of the families was a missionary to the Indians. First here in Michigan, the Rapids of the Grand. Before there was a Grand Rapids, there was a Rapids of the Grand.
Yeah.
And then President Jackson decided to move all the Indians west. And first, the band that Jotham ministered to were moved to Sault Ste. Marie. So
that's Bill's family.
That's my family.
That's your family. And they were there for a while. Then they absolutely moved them out and took them to Kansas. And that's where the modern families were developed in Kansas.
It is sad to realize. I was giving a lecture last week on movies. And every time I give that lecture, it's uncomfortable because the first feature film ever produced was Birth of a Nation, which is a horrible film when you watch it. I mean, it's just dreadful. And then the first talkie was The Jazz Singer, and I bring up the old ads that showed Al Jolson in minstrel blackface.
Yes.
And I think to myself that the two, America is known for the movies, and our heritage is so tied, and our two firsts in that era were both embarrassing films by today's standards.
Yes.
And should have been by those standards for more.
Well, minstrel shows were really common even when I was a little kid still. I saw a minstrel show when I was 6 or 7.
I would see Al Jolson on TV, I mean.
And I just got a scrapbook from someone that we're going to use in an exhibit to the Historical Society, and this is in the 50s here in Lansing, and there was blackface.
Ooh.
I was like, wow. I mean, we weren't 10 years from civil rights movement.
Wow.
And they were still doing blackface here. And innocently, sort of, you know what I mean?
Now, were you able to find any letters that any family?
Yes.
Oh, you were?
Yes.
Ooh.
Not the very oldest ones, but after the Civil War, yes. Again, very fortunate to have those tools.
I'll bet. Now, has the family grown over time or shrunk over time?
Well, unfortunately, the main family line that was my late first wife's line didn't have any children. So it did kind of...
It stopped?
Well, it didn't expand. It didn't multiply.
Oh, they didn't multiply. Okay.
There were some.
But they're still going on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yes.
All right.
And there's some still here in Michigan.
Interesting.
There's a Michigan angle. I remember the first time I discovered that they had settled in Michigan. Oh my goodness, right here. The family was right here. They're down by Adrian.
Did you contact them?
Yes.
Were they surprised?
Yes.
You sort of figuratively knocked on their door?
Yes.
Yeah, that happened to my mom.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, some relatives she did not know she had.
Well, I hope they were wealthy and they left her.
They were
left
wealthy,
things to
but they
her in the
didn't leave
will.
her any.
Oh,
There was no reason to do that.
I have dreams about how
Yeah.
there must be some missing relative out there who's, just ready to leave me a large pile of money.
Did the Indian part of the family even leave any relatives back here that you could trace?
No, when I say Indians, it was just they were immersed in Indian affairs.
Okay.
No.
He was the missionary. He
Yeah.
wasn't. Yeah.
And they played a large part in the environment of the time.
Were they was that person a Catholic or a Methodist?
The missionaries of Baptists.
Baptist. Okay, that was unusual for working with Indians.
I learned a lot in writing this. Baptists were popular after the Revolutionary War because they were just the opposite of what people were used to with the Anglican Church, which was the state church in Virginia, for example. And people liked the idea of more self-government, which the Baptists allowed. They didn't have a hierarchy back to some super, certainly not the Pope, even anything equivalent to that. So there were all sorts of odds and ends and things, and some of the families are still Baptists to this day.
That's interesting. You're listening to LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. Alan, I also wanted to talk to you a bit. You retired from Michigan State University's Department of Economics, and I was so delighted to find out that your area of interest and research has been behavioral economics, because I think that's a reform that has been long needed in the field of economics. The traditionalists sort of feel that everybody acts as a rational actor, and I haven't met a rational actor in years, if I ever knew one at all. It's the idea that people will always look at their own personal bottom line and try to make the wisest decision, and I think people are far too emotional, impulsive, complicated for that kind of simple analysis.
I should correct one thing.
Yes.
My department is now called Agricultural, Food, and Resource Economics.
Oh, so you were in that? Oh, that's great. Oh, interesting.
Just some of your interests.
Yes, it certainly does. Yeah, the idea of sustainability in agriculture and getting away from
finally come to the fore.
Well, one of the things I would hope that behavioral economics allows for is the idea that there are all these hidden costs in the food system, for example, that are simply externalized and picked up in other places. We look at the billions of dollars spent in our farm bill, for example, which truly, I think, distorts food policy and culture. So what kind of work did you do in the field? And tell me more about that. I'm excited to think that I'm talking to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about.
Well, let's talk a little behavioral economics.
Yeah.
I think you can put this in personal terms. I had two neighbors. They retired out of state or out of town. They put their houses up for sale. Of course, they got caught in the financial crunch and fiscal failure. So all of a sudden, their houses were worth a third less than they had been, and that higher price stayed in their mind and affected their behavior. And the first thing we teach in economics 101 is that sunk costs in the past don't count. You should make the calculation now. Make your best choice. The fact that you've lost money is irrelevant, but it does affect people's thinking.
Yes.
And I had one neighbor who kept saying, I can't give my house away. She regarded selling it at the market as giving it away.
Yes.
That tells you something about the psychology of what's going on. On the other side of it, has been gone for at least 2 years, paying taxes, paying to have the lawn mowed, whatever. He too, I think, I've never talked to him explicitly about this, but I think he has an idea of what it was worth some years ago, and he wants that price.
Yes, he can't give it up, can he?
Can't give it up.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to admit that value changed. Now that's a behavioral phenomenon that economics in general has just tried to ignore.
Yes.
Well, so much of our culture led us to believe that our house was something we could sell and make a fortune off and live off. But I always thought, where would you live? Right. And if you sell your house, you gotta live somewhere.
Buy another one.
Yeah. Because the oddest.
At another inflated price. Yes.
Technically.
That's part of the challenge, isn't it? It's understanding. Drew Weston has written a book on the political brain, looking at how we think that voters make up their minds on policy. And we have these debates like we're going to have tonight where they assume people are sitting there with a little checklist of different issues and they say, oh, well, that's what he believes on Israel. Well, I guess I'm for him. And it has very little to do with that. It's an emotional response that you have. You cover it under the terms character or something else that sounds a little more highfalutin, but what you really mean is you're having an emotional response. And people do make, especially in ag economics, very big decisions. Farms are big investments. Huge. And it's a complicated world for those farmers nowadays, isn't it? How do they get out of the trap of being caught in the current system? I mean, you own 3, 4, 5,000 acres. You're raising commodity crops, wheat, corn, soybeans. Even if you decide to lop off 10 acres and grow vegetables for the local farmers market, they take away your subsidy for your other crops. You can't afford to keep doing it.
I have a former student that married a young woman that's very interested in being their own farmer on a small scale. And her father was kind enough to give her 40 acres to do with as she wished.
Oh, that's great.
Down by Chelsea. And they're going big into the local markets and whatever. I'm very proud of them.
Are they using hoop houses? And
I think they're going to build one. I don't know if they've built it yet. Speaking of hoop houses, I went to the hoop house gala.
Oh, did you? Yes.
Oh, is that fun?
Isn't it?
Do you know that Bonnie has a hoop house?
26 by 36.
Yeah, she's the first person I knew that owned one. Now I know a lot of people that own it.
I went down to the student organic farm and interviewed Dr. John Birnbaum and put up a video years ago called Curing America's Eating Disorder, featuring John. I'm not sure he wanted to be in quite that message, but I was fascinated by the hoop houses, and I really think it's something that individuals have to look at as well.
I've got a question for you. Is there any kind of irrational behavior that turns out to be good in behavioral economics? I mean, we just looked at the one where my house was valued and I had to have it. But is there one that's sort of the antithesis of that actually is good, where people believe in something so strongly that it turns out counterintuitively good?
Well, I think that some farmers take pride and they get a satisfaction out of being conservationists.
Yes.
Certainly my father always had a rotation which did not maximize his short-term income.
Wonderful.
But he had legumes and whatever. And that was very important to who he was. That's a kind of an emotional thing.
When I was managing editor of Michigan Farmer, I started there in 1970, left in 1983. I watched the rapid industrialization of agriculture and found myself getting increasingly concerned and horrified by some of the practices. And I did worry that a lot of farmers who were very bound up with the idea of being stewards of the soil really began to realize that a lot of the things they were doing were not fulfilling them. They felt it as a real moral obligation.
Yes.
Yeah.
A disconnect there somewhere.
Yeah. Festinger's theories of cognitive dissonance operated pretty well in that era. I went into some of those huge poultry houses and those large swine facilities, and that made me a vegetarian overnight. But,
really?
Oh yeah, I couldn't stand that anymore. Yeah, that's an emotional reaction, but it has changed. Do you think that this new type of farmer is sort of reinventing and rethinking some of those practices?
Well, I do think so. Yes. And for a long time, of course, the ag colleges were dragging their feet, and I think they're going into it with a real fervor with that. It's good.
It is, although I do see tensions. Yeah. Michelle Obama has is taking a lot of heat from various organizations. When Jennifer Granholm tried to have her vegetarian one day, she got a lot of backlash.
Not the least of the tension, of course, are the farm supply and the handlers of the products. They don't want to change.
No, and we have concentrated power in the hands of a few mega ag corporations. Yes. There's going to be a big battle, though, in California in this election because California is trying to demand labeling of GMO crops in that state. And if they do it, then basically it changes the culture in the country because they're such a large consumer and producer. And so that would be a very big change. We're seeing more citizen activism around these issues.
It's hard for me to gauge. I think so, but I haven't.
Now, did you
Measure.
look at the idea that farmers could make a sustainable living using these practices?
I think early on the bottom line conclusion was that your income would be less. So I just read something today. There have been some experiments, a few of less, perhaps, where they had determined that you could use sustainable practices and it wouldn't reduce the flow of income.
Oh, that's welcome news.
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, I've been seeing more work coming out of places. I confer periodically with a group in Punjab, India, and they're now using the term natural agriculture. And they're actually persuaded that it is the only form of agriculture that really is likely to be able to feed the world. That we're going to have to go back to sort of small scale, individual and small plot agriculture. That's what's fed people for millennia, and that's probably what's going to do it in the future as fossil fuel becomes prohibitively expensive.
Well, I have my own personal version of moving to sustainable agriculture. My home farm where I was raised now is in the conservation reserve.
Oh.
So all the cropland is now grass.
Yes, sort of the land bank.
And it's been there now for 20 years.
Wow.
Almost 20 years. And my vision is that when that program doesn't exist anymore, and I go back to tillable, that my land will be purified. It'll be ready to go. So
that's a good viewpoint. I hadn't thought of that.
Pleased with that image.
It has literally been in a land bank.
Yeah, that's real common too. Land banks that last that long.
Right.
I've never thought about what's under it though. It's pure
that soil web is very healthy, I would think. They talk about there's more life below the surface of the earth than there is standing on top of it. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting. So will you someday go back and start tilling?
Well, I'm just, I'm an old man now, but my children.
That's great.
See.
Wow. Well, I hope you will come back and talk to us again. And now
tell us where we can get the book.
Yes, tell us how to get the book. It is a Kindle download, right?
Just go to the Kindle store on Kindle. You'll put in my name, Alfred Allen Schmidt, or The Seekers, and it will come up, and you can buy it.
It is an SCHMID, correct? So without the T, otherwise they won't find it.
That's right.
Yeah, before you go, Alan, I just wanted to you spoke about your late spouse. That was Alice, who I worked with at the East Lansing Town Courier in 1972. In fact, I got the first mystery book from her to read.
Is that right? Did you just made the connection?
No, I knew it before he came. I didn't want to distract him, though. But I wanted to make sure I recognized that. She was pretty special there.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It was a good newspaper. It was a great newspaper.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. I used to do movies that would come out on TV or on DVDs in the early. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, that's great. So good to meet you, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
you. I look forward to more books.
All right.
Thank you. And now we are going to make a transition, and this is going to be Old Home Week for me. Those of you who would like to know, I used to do
Well, Alan was Old Home Week for me.
Well, so yes. This is my friend, Felix Reyna.
Hello.
Felix, greetings, everybody.
Felix.
You'll have to look into the camera there for the webcam.
Camera's over there. That's a phone, Felix.
Camera 1 or camera 2?
No, we're not. No,
we're over on this
Hey,
web.
how's it
We're
going?
on the web.
Nice to
These
see you
cameras
guys.
are not working.
No, they're not.
Well, let's move that out of the way so everyone can see me.
There,
See? There. Now you can see my pretty unshaven face.
I don't know how many viewers we ever get. I keep forgetting to check. I'm going to have to look that up one day. But Felix and I go way back because when Felix was 13 years old, right, and just
a young buck.
Yes, a wild kid.
Wild spitfire.
Yes. I used to have a public access television show with Ray Garcia called From Left Field. And we were on for 2.5 years till we got kicked out of public access in East Lansing. And I
Badge of honor.
badge of honor.
We were a rowdy group.
We were. And what we would do periodically, much to Ray's distress, because he never liked the fact I would do this, I would turn the show over to Felix and his friend Reagan, and they would take over the show. In fact, there's an episode, if you go to YouTube and you look up From Left Field and my name, you will see that they once tied us up in chairs and took over the show.
Very funny you should bring that up,
Yeah.
because I was actually just mentioning that to Mr. Schmitz.
Why? Yeah.
And I thought that was a funny story that I wouldn't mind sharing. But, I think the thing is that one evening, we were just regular, typical cameramen. And one evening, the co-host, Ray Garsha, didn't show up. So Bonnie suggests, hey, let's just throw on a rerun. That's fine. But we were already all there, so I just suggested, hey, I'll host the show.
Yes.
Why not?
Why not?
So it ended up coming off pretty well.
It did.
We did okay, and we got several video clips from that are funny. But
Hilarious.
I guess it came off so well that they wrote about us in the state news.
Yeah.
And Bonnie suggested that, hey, why don't you do this every couple of months?
Yeah.
So we did. We had a good four show run, and it was a lot of fun.
They got kicked off with us.
Yes,
I mean,
yes. I mean,
they share the honor.
Yeah, exactly. Badge right here.
You did a Christmas special?
We did.
I looked at that the other day. Felix went out and shot video, and this was before you. This is what years are we talking?
Oh, geez, I'm talking 94. Yeah.
Yeah, this was so far before.
Almost 20 years ago.
I know. The internet was not.
How old am I?
How old are you?
I'm 32.
See, and I'm now 68. Does that scare you? Yeah. I'm
Not too
surprised.
much.
I'm even surprised you recognize me. See,
Oh, please.
God. But we had a lot of fun on that show.
We did. We definitely did. We had a lot of fun. We did all sorts of outlandish, crazy things, talked about anything. I think the best part was that it was a live call-in talk show.
Yes.
So anyone could call in at any time and just pretty much speak their mind, which is enjoyable to me.
But I may have never told you the story. We would have periodically somebody who would call in, and they'd have a long, convoluted story about something that would go on, and it would always end with the heads coming off chickens. Chicken Man would get us every single time. He'd change his voice. He would call at different times during the show. He would start off on a different tangent. Years later, and then I learned to just dread Chicken Man calling because I knew he'd get me everything. I was guest lecturing in a class at MSU, and a hand went up in there, and it was Chicken Man. And he outed himself to me. He's just lucky I didn't go beat it.
So he finally told you. He's like, I gotta come clean.
Yes.
Wow.
And he was in some frat, and he said every Thursday night they would sit down and watch us, and they would come up with new Chicken Man stories every week. So we were a big hit with some frats.
Yeah, I can recall several times when they would call us up on our show while we were taking over and tell us to do these crazy, outlandish things like stand up and show us my excellent slacks, So I would stand up, much like this, and then like do this into the camera,
Yes.
and be like, "Hey, I got excellent pants." And then they booed Regan's pants because his pants sucked.
Yes, Regan was your foil, constantly.
He is
was.
not as much fun anymore.
It was a precursor to a certain kind of looseness that I'm not sure.
Punked and
Yeah.
those kind of shows. Yeah.
Reality TV at its best.
Yeah. I would say that we were reality TV, but the thing is that it's just gotten so saturated. The market has gotten so saturated with reality television programs, it kind of just is sickening now.
Yeah.
So there are 100 of them, and they're cheap to produce.
Exactly.
There's no talent.
Yeah, they don't have to pay talent.
Right.
They can come up with the most inane stunts for these people to try and do, like as in, Fear Factor or Survivor and stuff like this. And, I guess they really got their bread and butter with Survivor, so they could throw these people on an island and not give them food.
We didn't make
You don't even have to feed them.
No, you don't even have to feed them.
We didn't even make people eat bugs or anything.
Right.
But I remember one night you had to send out for tacos.
I did send out for
That
tacos.
could be a Survivor series in some places.
It was the Trowbridge Road Survivor. That's exactly what it was. And
Trip down Taco Lane.
yeah, exactly. And then as soon as I got back with the tacos, I thought it was really funny that we
went across the street and bought tacos.
Hey, it was right across the street. I bought them from this nice guy named Syed who made up some tacos. So it's always nice to have someone from Central African Republic working at a Mexican restaurant and serving me, who is half Irish, half Mexican, some tacos that I can bring to all of my people who are working at this show. And then when I get back, I see a mutual friend of ours, John Mizga,
Yes.
laying down on his belly with his large posterior up in the air, and we were watching a cartoon on our show.
I know. Miska was always.
Do you think they'd let anybody do that this day?
No, and you know what's happened, unfortunately. I mean, we really have seen a clampdown on the culture. If you sort of gauge it from 1968 to about 1995, you could get away with a lot. You know what I mean? There was a sense of humor and playfulness.
It was subversive,
Yeah.
and it was always like we kind of tried to keep it under the radar.
Yes.
But at the same time,
we actually didn't want viewers.
Right. No. Here's the thing: is that the people
Don't watch us. Don't
Don't
watch
watch
us.
us. I'd like to keep my job.
The people who would know, and that's
Exactly.
just all you have to say.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
we had the kind of humor that would reach to the people who would get it.
Yes.
This is kind of a precursor of internet TV. Some of the
Absolutely.
shows that are still being produced on TV now.
Well,
internet.
what we did, we had Professor Mike Sclavani from the sociology department, and he would host our Carnival of the Stars as well. And he would get all of these graduate students who would come on and do bizarre things. I twirled baton for that one, and then we got not a bad baton twirler, I must admit.
Wow.
You just had a short,
Short
you couldn't.
Yeah. Throw it up 6 inches and catch it.
We had rap people and magicians. We challenged all these grad students from these various colleges to come up with screwy stuff they could do on the show. And then Ray Garsha came in with his band, the Phlegm Chunks.
Oh, I heard
And
that.
that was fairly impressive.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
We did. There were some strange elements in some of those shows.
I didn't know until maybe after about 6 months that I had known him that he actually played music. It took me a while to actually learn that because he was kind of.
There are some who might not agree.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Actually, music.
Okay.
He had a wonderful punk vibe.
He dabbled
Yes.
in music.
Yes.
Okay, we'll just say that we can agree on
Yes.
that. That'll work.
Ray is still teaching. And
Awesome.
still causing trouble wherever he goes. Karen Runn, who was the first host of the show, has probably buried all of those memories because she's now a fairly powerful person in government in Boulder, Colorado. I think I expect an email from her every day asking me to burn the tapes.
Someday she'll get really, really famous, like Jennifer Granholm and the Bachelor tapes.
The Bachelorette tapes
will come out.
Exactly.
Well, maybe it's not so much for the content as that she just doesn't want to look at Ray's old mullet anymore.
Oh God, that was impressive.
Yeah, burn Ray.
Oh, burn Ray. And I think Ray actually hated you.
I know he hated me.
I think
He hated me. He was so mad. Like the very first show that we did, I just remember sitting there when Ray came in late. We went on the air at 10 p.m. and it could have been maybe 10:15 or so. Ray comes in and just gives me the stink eye. I remember saying, "Hey Ray, we're hosting the show tonight. How do you like that?" Because we would always give him shit when we were out.
Whoops. What? We don't have a little button like we did there. And actually, that was one of the other big differences. Back in the old days on public access, language was not an issue.
No, it wasn't.
No.
All you couldn't drop was the F-bomb.
Well,
You could say anything else. I mean, you could
did
still
that,
drop the
yeah.
F-bomb, but it was kind of, frowned upon.
frowned upon. Yes.
Yeah.
Except in New York. Cable in New York, you can pretty much do anything.
Robin Bird held that show in New York, and she did the entire show nude every week on public access.
Yeah, I remember the Robin Bird show. I've
Yes.
seen that. Yeah, and she happened to do one of these numbers. Let me look into the camera so if anyone's watching, they can see it. She'd be like, ha 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 ha.
Yes.
Is there a best of cable?
A best of from left field?
Yeah, sort of the weird. No, not just yours, but across the nation.
Oh,
God, that'd be
Oh yeah,
interesting.
like local cable.
Well, that would
I'm
be,
sure
that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
That would be one heck
But
of
it
a
would
seller.
be the show would run a year. Wouldn't it?
Yeah,
So
there's
you
so
could
many different
just
shows.
edit it to our versions. You could
Yeah.
probably have a reality TV show.
Yeah.
That was in the days when there actually was a sort of belief that there was a First Amendment and you did have free speech, and that somehow government, since it was government sanctioned, because the argument was that if you were going to grant a monopoly to a cable station, then part of their agreement was that they had to put on programming that was of value to the community. And that, it still exists in those contracts, but it's been interpreted very differently over the years.
A lot of them just say that, you know, we do infomercials, so that's a service to the community, which is bunk. You
It's
know,
become such a huge business now. It's
yeah.
a totally different animal than when it started.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan, in the basement of the Able Sites Learning and Technology Center. We're here with Felix Reyna, who used to take over my old show from left field on WEN1 in the old days. I've been doing free media and weird media in the community for a long time, Felix.
And that's why you run into weird people like me.
Exactly. What are you doing now?
Well, I'm a freelance musician. I play guitar and keyboard and piano and bass and drums and all sorts of other instruments for a couple friends of mine who do music. They manage a couple of rap and R&B groups. So I just go over there and play whatever I play, and then they just take it and put it in their machine and chop it up the way that they want. Cool. So I figured that's fair.
Now you did study here, didn't you, at LCC?
I did go to LCC for a little bit, yes, and I also went over to MSU for a while too.
Oh, I didn't know you'd been over there.
Yeah.
You experimented with internet radio early on.
Yes, a few years back, I would say maybe 2006, I started my own internet radio station. Well, I didn't start it. I was a co-starter of it, I suppose, is the best way you can say it. Me and a few friends of mine, we all got together, and we started LansingRadio.com, which had a few different shows, a little something for every taste, and it went on for a while, but the thing was is that we were making just enough money to stay on the air, so we couldn't pay any of our employees or helpers or anything, so we decided, as opposed to just keep on going and just, you know, stay flat and not get in the black, we decided
one of the challenges, and I still think it's a challenge, is that initially a lot of these internet radio stations got started and they were not paying royalties on the music that they were playing on the air.
Well, here's our thing.
And I thought that was the way the internet should have been to get started.
Oh, and, yeah, of course. Well, here was our thing. With Lansing Radio, we had a slogan that was, new music first, independent artists always. Oh. So whenever someone would send us their music, it would also come attached with a release form, so we could use it for free, just to get their names out. So we had a whole bunch of people from all over the country, from 15 different countries abroad.
Wonderful, Mom.
Yeah, we did really well. So people would just send us their music. We would play it and make sure and plug them and plug whatever album they had to sell or whatever they wanted, really. You know, I mean, if they're going to send us music that we can use for free, then of course we're going to help them out as well. So it made for not only a great radio show, but it made for great business as well.
Well, one of the things people may not be aware of is the consolidation in the radio business means that after Reagan's deregulation, we simply lost independent radio stations across the country, picked up by the major corporations like Clear Channel, and they dictate exactly what's going to be played. You're not going to hear any local unsigned artists with their CD.
You can't even break in if you want to.
You can't, no. And
now we've got Dave and Mike.
You are darn too.
You just can't change the programming.
No, definitely not. I mean, it's absolutely
it's fireable.
Yeah,
and it means that the DJ that you think you may hear occasionally is probably thousands of miles away from some centralized studio. It's a totally different ballgame than it was before. And I was hoping the internet would fill that niche because many of us grew up with a sort of vibrant A&M radio and a really sophisticated FM radio. Would do a lot of long-form jazz and that sort of thing. And I thought the internet would be perfect for that, but it doesn't seem to have happened.
Not so much, really. Yeah. When we were playing music, we actually set up a studio with pretty sophisticated equipment. You know, we were doing okay, but it was in one of my friend's bedrooms in Mason, Michigan. So we sat there and would just record our show and upload it to the internet, and it would play every week. It was called The Big Mix with Felix. And since we had unsigned, unheard of artists, I'm sorry, my mouth got a little dry for a second. We would always have these people that no one had ever heard of. So it was always exciting and new and fresh. So we weren't like your typical radio station, whether it be internet or FM or AM or anything. We would always play stuff that was always new, always something that you never heard before, but we made sure to keep quality control.
So you were the final arbiter of what went on and what didn't. You didn't just take all comers.
Exactly.
Okay, so
we got a lot of junk.
Okay.
But the thing is that it didn't have to necessarily suit my taste.
Okay.
I would just I have an ear for music, and if something was good, then I would put it on, even if I didn't like it.
So it was eclectic. You might do folk and jazz.
Oh, it was well, it wasn't so out there off the wall. I mean, I think we stuck with like pop and R&B and rap and rock.
Oh, okay.
You know, we didn't do any country music or any jazz or any blues, even though I kind of wanted to swing in that direction. But my friend who was the engineer, I let him have a little bit of say, you know.
Every once in a while.
Every once in a while, big up to T. Cali. Yeah. I let him have a little bit of say, but the thing is that at the end of the day, I was the one who made the decisions on what went on and what didn't, and I kind of just didn't want to argue.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Felix about, so what are your future plans? What do you want to do? Where do you want to be when you hit that big 4-0?
Well, I am definitely looking to try and get into some form of television or radio, or maybe start up my music career again. But you know, I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants right now. And speaking of flying by the seat of my pants, I would like to say happy birthday to my nephew Owen, who turns 9 today.
9, wow.
He turns 9. Happy birthday, Owen.
4 years when we'll bring in, you can host the show.
Exactly. You can come in and host the show.
A fine family tradition.
Right, exactly. I'll just pass it along.
Yeah.
That seems to work out pretty well.
Well, you're very creative, and I've always wondered exactly how it's going to work, what you're going to be doing in the future, because you've got so many ideas. I mean, there aren't very many, I'll be honest about it, there aren't very many 13-year-old kids that would turn over the TV show to, even as loose as that show was. But you really had a spark for comedy and for video. A lot of the video clips that you did you ever get them uploaded onto YouTube? Are they
I have some of them on a VHS cassette that I am unable to locate.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and that's very heartbreaking to me.
That is.
So, other than that, I think only the ones that our friend Peter Mayer has uploaded to Facebook and YouTube are the ones that I can find right now.
Okay.
I mean, as much as I would love to see every single one. Something you might not have known is that in 2000, I got another show on WELM.
No.
Yeah.
Did you change your name?
I didn't call it From Left Field.
A good move, yes.
I called it S squared D squared.
S squared D squared? And you were a resident of East Lansing at the time?
Sort of.
Well, see, that was my problem too. They kind of got me on that.
No, that's exactly how I got canceled.
Whoops, residential.
You see, we were bad people, I guess.
They put up a whole new list of rules on the wall, Bill, and I took a magic marker and wrote on the last of the 17. You could tell the rules were mostly aimed at us. So I wrote on the end of rules suck. And they called the police and wanted to know if I could be arrested for graffiti and defacing.
Yeah, defacing their sign, their dry erase board.
They got a little tight.
They were a little unhappy with me because we had following us John Mangopoulos and Bob Wiener.
And that was okay, what he did?
He was fine.
Okay.
But Bob and I would get into Bob and I and John Mangopoulos would get into shouting matches in the hallway as the two shows their crews.
Yeah, that would have been a reality TV.
And we should have had the cameras out there. That was a better show than we had on half the time.
I think one of the funniest things that I ever remember about both From Left Field and the Felix show was that we had cameras once in a while, and I remember seeing a highlight clip from us just hanging out outside or in the camera, or in the studio after the show was done.
Oh, outtakes.
We would just go wild and like dance around and.
We had a good time. It was a wonderful era. It really was.
It was a blast. It was definitely a blast, and I feel
Felix,
completely
we're going to talk.
honored.
Now that we've got the internet and we've got webcams and cameras, we'll talk.
All right.
There's got to be a way that we can reprise both your show and mine.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's not going to be a problem.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Felix.
coming.
I hope
Great
you
meeting
come
you.
back again.
Pleasure meeting you both. Well, I mean, not meeting you.
And
I've known
re-meeting me.
re-meeting you. I've known you for a good, what was it now, 19 years? 18 or 19?
Oh, it's hard to believe that it was that long.
Yeah, it's been a while. Oh, yeah, big up to my sister, Casey.
Okay, take care.
Thank you so much.
Holler at a boy. What? I'm hood. I'm just kidding, I'm not.
We're gonna be joined by Dave Muley right now, and Dave, we've had on our show recently. He was talking about one of his developments that he had worked on, but what's come up since then is Preservation Lansing had a contest or not nominated were local preservation projects in various categories. And Dave, you won one, didn't you?
I guess so.
Ah.
That's what I've been told. I got the letter today.
Tell us what you won it for, because it wasn't the ones we were talking about. It was the one previous, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was for a duplex that we restored at 127, 129 Leslie Street, which is on the east side. And it was built in 1915. We spent 18 months on it and finished it I think it was about August of last year, actually. So we've been done for, a few months. Yeah, and I'm really flattered that they had quite a collection of buildings, and they picked 5, and then 3 of us are getting awards.
Do you want me to go through the awards, or you probably know who they are, don't you?
Well, yeah, I think it's the Armory, the Gillespie Group did the Armory, right up the street here on Sycamore, Arlene and Castaneer, or the attorneys on the corner of Sycamore, 403 on Sycamore. And the gas station, Mr. Schrader's gas station there in Old Town.
The little
The
one.
one that they're doing now, the artisanal food.
Right.
The coffee.
Yeah, and coffee, right.
Artie's, is it called?
Artie,
Yeah,
exactly.
Artie's, right.
They won one also.
They won one. So my project, the Gillespie Group and Mr. Schrader, won awards. And there were 2 others. Gene Townsend's, the Walker Building in Old Town was one of the nominees, and then the attorneys up here.
It's called the Lane and Charte.
Yes.
The Walker Building is a great looking building now in the corner. It used to be that old funky kind of dollar store, and then before that it was a grocery store. It's right in the corner of Washington and Washington and
Grand River. Yeah.
Gorgeous store now.
So the awards are in different categories, and they're everything from.
I think they were. They were residential, commercial. And
Well, they were more commercial. They were. They're all commercial buildings. Mine is the closest to residential, but it's still it's a duplex.
Mm.
And I think the first year they had to sort of, pick their battle and see, I'm hoping that they get more into individuals from the city and the neighborhoods who are doing projects.
Right. Yeah.
Not necessarily the big projects. And mine was the smallest. When they said, "Well, are you under $1 million?" I laughed about that.
Gee,
My labor.
Let me check.
Do I figure my labor?
No, you didn't figure your labor. I was going to say.
But, the Army was a large project and in a whole different kind of category than what.
That's why I wondered, because it didn't seem. I don't know how you would even put those in the same.
Yeah, but I think the important thing is that there's a group with credibility that's starting this conversation about preservation in Lansing, and it's been a while. I mean, the city had a preservation officer in 2002 or 3. They gave a few awards back then. I actually got one. And then, with the budget and the things as they were, there was no formal organization that was actually recognizing these projects.
So this is an attempt to do by sort of positive reinforcement then, to bring attention to the issue of the importance of preserving our heritage and try to reward it in some small way and get people talking about it. Is that the...
Yes, I think it is. And coincidentally, is Preservation Lansing, one of the main people involved with it is Gretchen Cochran. And she's president of the Downtown Neighborhood Association. But coincidentally, it was timed with the announcement that LCC was going to tear down 3 houses. They weren't tied together, but it gave them a voice all of a sudden. I mean, and that happens. And that wasn't their goal. I mean, their goal was to be more on the positive side, but I think also it's going to serve as a voice that will alert people to things that maybe shouldn't be done, or we ought to think about seriously, because we've torn down way too many buildings in the city that could have been preserved
and would have been real treasures to hang on to.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think of the school right across the street here that maybe shouldn't have been done. Lansing Central. It's a gorgeous Victorian building.
Yeah, that historic preservation. I think it's interesting that they left the historic part out of the name, and I think that was probably intentional. Preservation of any sort has sort of been a hard sell in Lansing. We've tried to do historic districts in the downtown area. In fact, Bob Morris is getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, which is
Linda Peckham and Bob Morris.
Linda also, which is so appropriate because for the last 30 years, he's been the go-to guy, and almost on his own, with help from some of us, has done great things with preservation.
But people think that as soon as there's an additional level of regulation, then they can't do what they want. And I think this group is more interested in putting out their projects that were successful, that create what there was an ancient architect called Vitruvius, and he said buildings need three things. They need firmness, commodity, and delight. And delight is what keeps us going on old buildings. I mean, they're all built well.
It's irrational.
They all have, well, yeah, I know you were talking about
So there's an example of irrational economic behavior.
But not, it may be irrational economic behavior,
Right.
but it's very rational when you think about the meaning. It's an object that we interact with, old houses we interact with kind of on a regular basis. And it teaches us that we are not the most important humans to be on the planet. When you're in an old house, you know that generations of people have occupied that.
Yeah.
They've been through wars. They've been through, the Beatles coming to America. All those things that happened to those folks. Now we're having other experiences, but somehow, those lives were contained in these buildings, and the buildings survived, and the culture so far has survived. And so there's a real lesson that goes beyond the economic part of it that we sometimes miss, and it sounds a little, out there, but it is very real. It is very real, and I think people need to understand that.
It's culture, and I think what Lansing, unfortunately, when you think about Ann Arbor, for example, I always use as the example that Zingerman's got started in that old house, and they've found a way to repurpose and take it and sort of treasure that house and say, find a way to salvage it for the next generation. My husband and I just yesterday, after eating at the Travelers Club, which I'm very sorry will soon disappear, went out to Mason because Drew said, let's go out there and just drive around the city. Because he said, there's so many lovely old homes out there. Gorgeous homes.
Built around a town square concept.
And you know what they did that was so different? I grew up in a town outside of Cleveland for a few years called Burton, Ohio, town of 1,000. They brought in this designer who did a sort of ersatz 1800s look, where every store had to pay to put on the same kind of shingled awnings and so forth. And it looked fun. It was just very fun. It was tacked on at the end. This is the kind of quality, I think, in Mason that just comes from within. That courthouse is beautiful, just stunning building. And all the shops around are individual, unique. It's not that some business association said, let's have a cookie cutter. And I just think that, Lansing needs to get on the ball here and recognize it has things worth seeing.
Bonnie, you and I were talking recently about, I was down in Rio town a couple weeks ago shooting some photographs of the restored or being restored depot. And I thought that stretch of buildings along there is the next target in Lansing for preservation. I mean, you've probably been down there.
Oh yeah,
those are commercial structures most of them, but there is some housing stuck in little close side streets.
There are, we think about preservation in terms of larger projects and commercial buildings generally. I mean, but there are so many gems in the neighborhoods. I mean, not only on the west side, which has its wonderful inventory of houses, but on the streets on the east side, these are just, blue collar working class buildings. But many times the original designers, put detail in and put proportion in and had an idea of what would delight the passerby as well as the person occupying the house. And then technology came along and we sort of covered up a lot of that. But, my view is that whether it conforms to the Bureau of Interior Standards or not, I think the best approach to old houses is to put them back the way they were around the period they were built. Because not only is that, it just seems like that is the moment when the house showed best.
Right. That was what it was conceived for.
No matter what.
This is one of my pet peeves about Lansing houses. In any city you go in, is people planted inappropriate plantings around the house.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, and then they just covered things up. You can't see the house.
Oh.
Houses weren't meant to be covered by shrubs. And you can't see any of the architecture anymore.
I guess I haven't looked at that. I'll have to paying attention to
We've had plants in that are in 50 years.
That's a great point because for one thing, it's not good for a house to be, it needs to breathe and needs to have airflow around it. But if you walk the neighborhoods and you look behind some of those overgrown bushes, you'll see some fantastic detail and, porch skirting and just little things that you don't see because it gets covered up.
Well, one of the things we forgot to mention, which Gretchen would be not happy about, is there's an award ceremony It's October 24th at 5 p.m. and it's at a building that could be targeted for preservation. It's at the Genesee Street School, 835 West Genesee.
That's this Wednesday?
It's this Wednesday beginning at 5 o'clock, and they're asking people to come to this event in steampunk.
Yes. That's
So what are you going to
that's a
wear,
challenge.
Dave?
Well, I'm
Steampunky.
I'm glad that Bob Morris is getting an award, and when he makes his speech, I hope he's able to explain to me what steampunk.
Well, it's a pretty demanding costuming. You better be really serious about that. You've got to start looking for some brass and all sorts of.
I googled it, and I'm still a little confused.
It's gorgeous there. Gorgeous. I just don't know how many steampunkers there are around Lansing. I guess we're about
We'll
to find out.
Yeah,
Well,
we'll
thank you
find
so
out.
much for joining us. This has been a great show tonight. I would invite everybody to come back next Monday night at 7 o'clock for Lansing Online News Radio with Bonnie Buckaroo and Bill Castanier, and we will see you then. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan.
That's nice. You're just touring a town like Mason. That's what it's the light when you see those kind of buildings.
We had such a good time.